How do everybody? Welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be sculpting a figurine based off of this eyeball goblin drawing I did a while back. Now let me preface this by saying that I have no idea what I'm doing with sculpting. I have done maybe 2 sculptures before in my entire life, so this is a lot of trial and error. So if you do know what you're doing and you're watching this, I apologize. I edited out as much of the frustrating nonsense as I could, but it's still probably very apparent to somebody who knows what they're doing that I'm doing a bunch of stuff wrong. Anyways, I'm starting out by making an armature. That's where you take some wire and you twist it up and make legs and shapes, and you use foil. And here I'm adding the foil to the wire and making a sort of a ball with some legs. And there we go. I'm going to add some arms onto it later. This is super sculpty, and I'm just mangling that block. I don't think it really matters. And rolling out, conditioning the clay. I, kneaded up a ball of it and then rolled it out beforehand. So that's what you need to do. And here I am putting some, like a thin layer around the foil ball to make the eyeball shape, and then some thin layers of clay around the legs here. I end up pulling this off later because I didn't think about it ahead of time, but you need to hold on to something while you're sculpting, and so that was just causing a bunch of problems. Here I'm adding a bunch of little noodly boys onto here to make the veins, and I learned a lot from doing this. In hindsight, I would have done this slightly differently. I probably would have added lots of little blobs all over the back and then gone, progressively finer with the vein detail as I came up, and actually sculpted the veins out of little noodly bits up around the eyeball so I could then paint those, but it's not how I did it here. Next time, I guess. Here I am using a silicone shaper tool, a silicone sculpt, I don't know. I ordered a pack of inexpensive sculpting tools off of Amazon or something, and this came in that pack. And so here I'm just adding in some details. Here I've discovered I believe this is called a ball stylus, so I'm using that. I'm getting this is the original texture I was coming up with was looking like a little too much like hair, and I feel like this allowed me to get a very vascular, veiny sort of look going on. And here I'm, poking some holes in his butt, and then ripping the clay off the legs, because I realized that you have to have something to hold on to or while you're sculpting the other part of it. So there's no way I could bake this and then, so that I could hold on to the top and then be able to sculpt the legs. You see what I'm saying? Like, you have to have, like, I have to bake this part, then put the fresh clay on the legs so I can then sculpt them. There's probably a better way to do it. Like I said, I have no idea what I'm doing, so this is all trial and error. It seemed to work out fine, though. And here I'm adding lots of little details. Like I said, I would have done this differently. Hindsight's 20/20. I would have actually made little noodles for each vein, knowing what I know now. Here I'm adding the iris onto the eyeball and just brushing it with some alcohol here to kind of try and smooth everything out. And then using a ball stylus here to make the pupil. Here I'm using my silicone shaper tool to get some texture in the iris and just, doing like sort of compass, you know, cardinal directions, and then, you know, splitting the difference in between. And it ends up looking kind of like a butthole, but that's just, you know, once it's painted, it's fine. And then, yeah, I poked that stylus into the pupil again to kind of clean up the edge. And then here it's baked for the first time, and now I'm trimming. I realized the feet were really long, so I trimmed the armature back a little bit. And now I'm making new leg skin and wrapping it, and this looks a lot better with the feet just being a little bit shorter. They were ever slightly too long. And I had kind of bent the wire over, and it bulked up the toe, which I didn't want. I wanted the toe to kind of taper, because if you look at the original drawing, his limbs are like very, you know, they're supposed to be like optic nerves, so they taper to a point. And, you know, like it's supposed to be like it's, I don't know, almost like ripped out of a head or something. It's pretty gory when you think about it, but yeah. So here I'm using the silicone shaper tool to kind of get that sort of, I don't know, vascular nerve sort of texture. And then I wanted to do, it's almost like the end grain on a piece of wood on the soles of his feet, you know, like that's where the you know, nerve endings were like severed or so, I don't know. Anyways, here I'm drilling some holes for his arm armatures, and I'm not sure if this is the safest way to do this. If you're using a drill, be safe. Don't do what I do, ever. And yeah, here's the arm armature. I love saying that, arm armature. And I'm just bending the wires into elbow shapes, shoulder joint elbow shapes. And then at this point, I realized it was really unstable. It you know, basically just rotated back and forth. So you'll see here in a second, after I trim his fingernails off here a little bit, that I will drill a second set of holes to kind of use another piece of wire. Yeah, right here. Safety first. Don't do what I do. I don't think the drill bit can come all the way through, but you probably want to support the piece on your desk or table or whatever. But yeah, here's the second piece of armature, and I'm just twisting it around so that the arms don't move, you know, they can't move on their own, because I didn't want it to be like articulated. And then you do want to clean up the dust. I know I learned the hard way, because if the dust, the cured clay dust gets into the raw clay, it just turns into a nightmare, and you don't want that. You can't, you know, because the cured clay isn't pliable anymore, so you can't sculpt it. And then, yeah, here I'm joining the shoulders to the piece and using my silicone shaper tool again and my finger. And I didn't have all my supplies yet. There were still a couple things, you know, that hadn't been delivered. So one of the things was the Bacon Bond, which is like a liquid clay adhesive, which would have probably been useful here. I didn't have any issues, but I feel like it would have made the transition a little smoother. I don't know. Like I said, I know nothing. Take all of this with a grain of salt. This is me just, you know, flying by the seat of my pants here. And another thing that hadn't shown up yet was the smaller armature wire. So I just kind of free floated the fingers here. They're just little noodles of clay added on to, you know, there's no armature supporting the extra digits here. So it turned out fine. It would have been a little easier, I think, with the armature to support them while I was doing it, but, you know, the stuff hadn't shown up, so, and I got impatient, so what are you going to do? And then here, I was just sanding out the kind of surface of the eyeball globe, because it was a little lumpy. I feel like I could have done this a little better with sculpting, and I wouldn't have had to sand, but I don't know how to do that, so maybe I should watch another video on how to get stuff really smooth. I feel like it's more difficult to get a smooth surface when you're sculpting than a textured surface. And yeah, here he is all baked and ready for some paint. And the astute observers in the audience will notice that he's got some paint on him already here. And that's because my first paint job turned into a nightmare. And I tried to get, it's acrylic paint that I'm using, and I tried to get it off by soaking it in some water, but it just wasn't, I think with all the little crevices and everything, it wasn't peeling off. So I kind of gave up on trying to get it off. I was like, you know, we could just paint over it. It's fine. It might have affected like a tiny bit of detail, but I don't think anything major. So yeah, I started out by doing this kind of raw umber layer, and then now I'm adding some just titanium white on here. And there's a lot of things I would have done differently. This is one of them. I think I would have kind of painted him all one color and then done a wash, you know, hindsight being what it is. I watched some videos after completing this, you know, because I feel like sometimes it's like you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes you don't know the right questions to ask. So I feel like my next sculpt is going to go a lot better, just because now I know which questions to ask at all. So I'm doing a little bit of a dry brush with some I forget what red. It's like a crimson red here. And then I'm trying, you'll see I've kind of fiddled back and forth. I'm trying to get this transition from the dark red, or the sort of like darker, like veiny bits into the eyeball bits. And so I kind of end up working it back and forth a little bit. I added some pink in there, and now I'm going back over that with white. And this is probably really frustrating for some people to watch, but stay there with me. It ends up actually turning out pretty cool. I don't hate it in the end, but it was just a weird way of getting there. So, and this is just, I have no experience with acrylic paints either, so I'm like in the double, I don't know what the hell I'm doing zone here. And it's the surface texture of the paint was a little gloopy, but I think it's fine. Here I'm coming through with a brighter like scarlet red, and I'm detailing in some of these veins here. And I didn't like this at first, but I don't know, I gave it some time. I think it wasn't what I had envisioned in my mind, and then I gave it some time and looked at it later, and I was like, well, you know, if I don't think of it as what I was envisioning and just look at it for how it turned out, it's actually pretty cool. So, and then yeah, here I'm coming through with that brighter red, doing a little bit of dry brushing over some of the texture, and then here I'm using a really dark blue for the iris, and I get some on the white, of course, so I'll have to fix that later. And then I'm coming over it with this kind of like cool gray. It almost looks blue. It says it's cool gray. It's probably bluish. Just to pick out some of those details, and then some white for the highlights in the iris here. And I really love the way this iris turned out. This is exactly what I was going for. So, hey, nailed it. I mean, you know, it could be, it is actually really small. The figure is only 3.5 inches tall, maybe. So for a clay sculpture, that's actually pretty small, I feel like, I think. And yeah, here I'm touching up that little bit that went outside the lines, and then filling in the pupil with some black. And that's pretty much, oh yeah, dry brushing a little bit of that dark red to bring out some of those details over that lighter red. And this was kind of a weird move, but I think it ended up working really well. And that's pretty much it. So before I show the beauty shots here, let me just take a second to thank my Patreon subscribers. You guys make it possible for me to do a lot of this stuff that I wouldn't be able to do. If you're interested in that, there's links. And yeah, thank you very much. And here we go, the beauty shots. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff if you're interested in seeing more drawing and sculpture videos. And I will see you all in the next one. All right, bye now.